Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Impact Week and to discuss the Innovation Economy Council's latest report, Magnetic North, how Canada holds its own in the global race for innovation talent. The IEC, who is behind this report, is a coalition of tech sector leaders dedicated to shaping Canada's industrial innovation policy. It is a roster of organizations you'll recognize: Mars, Ontario Centres of Excellence, DMZ, Invest Ottawa, CCRM, Spark Centre, CENGN, NGen, MyTax, and Ontario Genomics. The IEC works with active members of Canada's innovation ecosystem to identify areas for in-depth analysis and offer timely insights to increase Canadian productivity and sustainable growth. Today, we're going to get into Canada's position in the race for global talent. How do you think we're doing in the race? Okay, according to data the IEC published today, jobs in STEM fields are holding up much better than the rest of the Canadian economy. After a dip earlier on, before the pandemic, there were nearly 100,000 more STEM jobs today than there were in February. There are 100,000 more STEM jobs today than there were in February. This resilience in the sector can be credited to a few things: an immigration system that courts global talent, growth in STEM grads, R&D tax credits, and we all know this, a thriving startup sector. So what do we need to keep and attract talent here? That's our discussion today. I'm Manjula Salvaraja, your moderator. I have a fabulous panel here on hand for this. John Hepburn is the CEO and Scientific Director of MyTax. Kitaki Desai is the Vice President of Business Development at Ontario Centres of Excellence. Sandra McClellan is the Vice President of Organizational Effectiveness and Rewards at OpenText. Michael May is the President and CEO of CCRM, which is, most of you may know this, but hey, let me expand on that acronym. It's the Center for Commercialization of Regenerative Medicine. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, John, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. Let's start talking about incubating talent. You're subsidizing post-secondary internships at MyTax, the vast majority of them being in STEM. Your organization offered 15,000 placements in 2020, mostly in STEM. How do you think this helps keep talent in Canada?
Well, we know it keeps talent in Canada. Of course, in the STEM disciplines, as those of us who've been to university know, really in some fields, in some STEM fields, the majority of graduate students and postdoctoral fellows are in fact international students. And we survey all of our students. And by the way, we're hoping to deliver 17,000 internships this year. We're kind of ahead of schedule. And we ask them, what are they doing? How did they, we obviously care about how the internship went, but we also ask them, are you employed? And so we compare that with Statistics Canada data. And of course, these students get connected to industry, industry gets connected to them, they get offered jobs, they want to stay in Canada. And our retention rate is almost double the retention rate that you'd expect for international students based on Stats Canada data from 2010 to 2016. We retain about getting on close to 80% of PhD students who study in Canada. Close to 80% of them stay in Canada. And a lot of them, of course, get jobs in the sort of industries where they do their internships. So it's been very successful, and for obvious reasons. It creates demand for high quality students in industry, and it also connects the high quality students to industry and gives them the sort of extra training they need beyond their technical training.
Those are certainly impressive numbers. I mean, let's dig a little bit further into what happens in biotech. Michael, companies sometimes have run these series of successful internship programs across the country and then still see people leave a post-internship. What's the picture in your sector? Can you elaborate on retaining talent in biotech specifically?
Yeah, certainly, MyTax is a great program, and the environment has changed dramatically. When I graduated or started a PhD 25 years ago, I was told that if I wanted a job in biotech or biomedical engineering, I would have to leave the country. And most of my peers did that. We now have, it's really all about receptor capacity. And the environment has grown such that we have companies, startup companies and PhD students who want to be entrepreneurs by the hundreds, really. That what we're creating is internships are fine, internship programs are fine. There's lots of interns. It's really that receptor capacity, and ideally they get hired by the companies. But what I think the internships really do is they help they help give experience, but they filter those high trajectory, students to ultimately be, on that path to leadership roles. So, biotech is now has the receptor capacity, and it's a wonderful, wonderful time for biotech.
It's interesting. So we've talked about, an organization that is doing so well with internships. We've talked about the importance of increasing receptor capacity, and you maintained leaders. And Sandra, I'd love to tap into your wisdom on making leaders. How do you nurture people to develop them into great leaders and do that here?
Yeah, and it's interesting. We talk about the magnetic north, but the magnetic north is made up of individual leaders who are in themselves talent magnets. It's the power of every manager and every leader. And if you think that everyone manages their career, if they think they need to leave Canada, if I say, what do I need to put on my LinkedIn profile this year? Right? That's how people think. And if leaders and managers are saying, what do you want to put on your LinkedIn profile this year? And how do we create those experiences for you? It's a new technology, a new product, a new role on the team. And if we're valuing leaders, and the pandemic has really helped leaders and managers be at the forefront. Managers and leaders are showing up, they're communicating, they're connecting on a new level. And it's in managing not jobs but careers. And if we hold leaders, if that's what it means to be a leader and manager, that's how people, even if they leave, they come back. And that's what being a magnet is all about.
Interesting. So it's I mean, these are some of the things. Do you think that there are other things that senior talent need to see to invest in staying and building their careers here?
They need to see the roles, they need to see the opportunities, and the more that we can create global roles in Canada that are not just Canadian, but that allow you to stay in Canada and collaborate with teams outside of Canada to get some of that experience without leaving, and making that part of our value proposition is really what can shift the experience.
What's interesting, some of the things that you're saying are echoed in this fantastic study that the report that the IEC put out today. By the way, if you know any HR talent, if you're listening in, you want to make sure that your HR talent is. I certainly learned a lot reading this report. There was a study that was quoted in there out of the University of Toronto and Brock University that suggests that the rhetoric that we're hearing south of the border about the tightening around the H-1B visa still didn't stop the flight of Canadian talent there. Actually, the number of Canadians getting H-1B visas rose 41% actually. So I'd like to talk about that global race for talent. Kitaki, as someone relatively new to Canada, you moved here after years of living and working in the US. Give me a contrast of the two for us. How is the process of settling here different from your experience there?
So Manjula, it's a huge contrast. And we lived in the US for 18 years. We moved just 4 months ago, 4 months and a few days. And the way I can best describe it is the United States is looking for ways to
Oh, I think we might have lost Kitaki's voice. Kitaki, can you still hear us? Okay, well, we'll come back to her in a bit. We'll come back to Kitaki in a bit because I do want to hear her voice on this. So let's talk very quickly about the gaps that we're seeing in the system. I know that Kitaki is going to talk about a little bit of how we can make Canada appealing for international talent. And we know there's a global race on. I mean, you talk to anyone who's a senior talent who's come into this town and they'll say they were being courted by companies, it's not just Silicon Valley and Austin, but in places around the world as well. So Barry McKenna has this interesting line in his report, 3 lines. He says, the innovation economy isn't just about ideas, it's an international walk for talented people with specialized skills and experience. Complacency is not a strategy. So that's a message to all of you. So for my question for all of you, very quickly, a lightning round is, what do you see the gaps are in keeping and attracting talent here? And you can call out anything: policy, talent, roles, schooling, recruiting strategies. Let me start with you, Sandra. What do you think it is?
2 things. One is the supply of talent, key skills, everything to do with security, people with cloud first experience, companies with cloud first experience, and just managing the smaller supply. So maybe just tapping the Toronto market and the Waterloo market is not enough, and we need to be better about thinking about a collective Canadian pool of talent and how we manage it.
John?
Yeah, again, from our surveys of our students, because obviously the ones who don't stay in Canada, we ask them, well, why did you leave? And it's for the obvious things, and they're in the report that you highlighted, and Majula. It's opportunity is better, perceived to be better in the States, and salaries are better in the States. And I think Michael nailed it when he said our capacity for absorbing sort of PhD and postdoctoral level talent in Canada is expanding, but we're nowhere near the American capacity to absorb these people. And so we need to expand the opportunities for highly skilled graduates in Canada.
Michael?
Yeah, our strategy for building a cell and gene therapy sector has been to create kind of stickiness, companies that stay in Canada. And so a strategy for us is to build manufacturing capability. And that focus on biomanufacturing is really, really relevant in the context of the pandemic as well. But there's a major gap in manufacturing expertise, process development engineers. We're hiring them by the dozens from around the world. And, this is key to a kind of a leadership position for us in Canada. And the salary point comes up in attracting individuals from around the world to fill those gaps.
And coming back to that idea of attracting people from around the world, Kitaki, I think you're back with us now.
Yes. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened.
That's okay. I mean, I certainly wanted to come back to this because, you started off by saying that, I knew that experience was decades long. I didn't realize that you were in the US for 18 years trying to get a green card or whatever it takes there. So talk to me about and you've been here 4 months and seemingly sounding far more integrated into the system here and absorbed by the system. So talk to me about that difference of settling here versus trying to settle there.
Absolutely. So, the 18 years that we spent there, both my husband and I were on, pretty much every kind of visa there is. The problem with the US immigration laws are they're, decades old. So it's not just this presidency. It is something that's been in law for years. And so what happens is people from populous countries like China, India, Mexico, Philippines, where the people that are applying for a lot of permanent residencies tend to be in this backlog for years and years. In fact, the backlog for Indian immigrants was over 1 million, 1.2 or so people. And so these people are all like us, we're waiting in line for their visas, for their permanent residencies. On the other hand, we applied to Canada more as a backup. I mean, when we started the process, now we qualified through the point system, which seems really fair based on all the your experience, your education, all the things, your age, that all the things that make sense. And we got our permanent residency while sitting in Pittsburgh without a job in less than 6 months. Just it was so drastic that it just completely changed our perspective towards even looking at Canada as our home. And we realized, even when we went through the landing process, that here's a country that's willing to welcome us with open arms for who we are. And the interesting thing that my husband said after we moved here is, for the 18 years I lived in the United States, I didn't even realize that I never felt the way I feel in Canada. Like, I feel like Canada is home. And I feel so welcome as an immigrant that I didn't even know I was missing that in the US. So what I think Manjula is missing big time is the success stories and how much immigrants can thrive in Canada. I don't think people around the world even know that.
Now, it's interesting that you bring up the environment that you've been in, and we've certainly heard a lot of anti-immigration rhetoric south of the border, which to a certain degree Canada has taken advantage of. I just wonder, we have a new administration on the horizon. How can Canada keep that advantage under a Biden administration that is going to be more likely is going to be much more open to global talent?
Absolutely. So, while the Biden administration, I'm really excited that that's what happened, and Trump did not get reelected. But like I mentioned, the laws that are in place are decades-old laws. So this is the immigration law, and if for reform to happen, it has to pass through Congress. Now, if you look at any of the Democratic policies or their platforms, they always stand on a comprehensive immigration reform, which means that you're putting the legal and the illegal part of immigration together. So what I think the problem is you have, high-skilled immigrants, which is a completely different pool of people, and undocumented immigrants, which are also really important people to get through the immigration process. But when you put it together as comprehensive immigration, no one gets on board. And if you look at the Biden platform, it is still all about comprehensive immigration. My husband and I advocated for immigration reform, and through several years of advocacy, we realized that the piecemeal approach to immigration is the only thing that can work. And so I would be shocked if there were any immigration reform in a Democratic presidency, because it's been the same since even the Obama presidency, and nothing went forward. What I think President-elect Biden would do is, sort of remove some of the gunking up of the system that the Trump presidency did, but that is not going to change the inherent laws, which will keep encouraging this backlog, right? So unless that changes, it's not going to change. So again, going back to sharing success stories and talking about how welcoming Canada is to immigrants. I mean, I can't even stop talking. People think that I'm being paid to do this, but it's real. And I will say that my community in Pittsburgh, they made us feel like home despite all the other stuff that happened. But we need to share our success stories.
Well, welcome. Side note, welcome to Canada, by the way. It's so good. It's so good to have you on this call and also in the country. And we've been talking about international talent, but John, I want to sort of take the lens back to the situation here. I found this line in the IEC report very interesting. More than 1 in 3 college-bound high school graduate students are choosing STEM programs. Thinking of what everyone has said about the gaps and then looking at the local pipeline, do you think we're training people for the STEM opportunities that exist? And do we have the right type of internship opportunities that today's STEM graduates are looking for?
Oh, double-barreled question. Obviously, I mean, look, we all know that Canada's post-secondary system is among the best in the world. So the technical training that students get in STEM disciplines is really second to none. And unlike the system south of the border and in some other countries, it really doesn't matter where you go to university, for example, or college in Canada. The quality of education is the same pretty much everywhere. At the undergraduate level, graduate level, there's a differentiation. So technical training, I have no issue with that. Our students get fabulous technical training. They get fabulous research skills at the graduate level. What they need in addition to that is the sort of, in a sense, practical training. I mean, I'm a chemical physicist. I was trained as I'm on leave from University of British Columbia, trained academic researcher. I certainly did not get the sort of training you need to function well in an industry, a not-for-profit, a government environment. I was trained to be a researcher, an academic researcher. And so I think, we believe at MyTax, obviously, that internships, partnership internships, not co-op placements, but true partnerships between industry and academia, where the students live in both worlds while they're getting their PhDs, for example, is a great way to train students in the extra, what I'll sometimes called soft skills, what I prefer to call professional skills, that they need to function in a sort of a problem-oriented group teamwork environment that you see in industry.
You know, it's interesting to kind of highlight that importance of an internship, because I know that even I think back to school and thinking of all the brilliant people around me, and you're right, eventually, actually, as time goes on, they're groomed more to be researchers too, right? So it's important to have that bridge to industry. Sandra, before we get to, we're getting questions already from people that are watching this. I do want to ask you about remote work. I mean, look at the situation we're in. We're talking remotely. I'd love to be doing this with you in person instead. But, you know, the IEC report has a segment on how remote work is reshaping tech. Tech companies now have workers spread across the country and the globe. And the pandemic has, in some sense, forced us to realize we can be so distributed. Open Text, I hear, is aggressively hiring right now, especially in Canada. Why the focus on hiring here? Does it give you a competitive advantage? And has the pandemic shifted how you collaborate and deliver, and therefore how you recruit and hire?
Yeah, so two parts to that question. Number one, 100% competitive advantage. And some of it comes from physical presence. So I'll come to remote work in a moment, but Canada's our headquarters. So number one, it in itself is a calling card. Canadian company, we have infrastructure here, offices in Waterloo and Ontario. So when we onboard 300 people, we can bring them into a community. And in this area, eventually, even if we come back to the office in a different way to collaborate in more of a hybrid way, the community is a draw. The second thing, and Michael, you mentioned salaries, and I think we need to understand the double-edged dilemma of salaries, because honestly, Canada is the sweet spot between being lower cost than the US, while, you know, great quality talent. And we need to keep the debate about salaries on the table, because that is part of the competitive discussion. And there's so many other things about being in Canada in terms of the cost of education for your children and some of the intangibles, that's really an important discussion. And the last thing is the stickiness, which is that if we can create jobs that turn into careers, that you can have a global experience without actually having to leave the country, that's part of the value proposition that I will say we will resort to trying to call people home. We'll look for Canadians living in the US and asking them if it's time to come home. And that is just one of a lot of the strategies. So the remote piece will fit into that. And for sure, we need to think about getting the broader country in frame and how we create a little bit of a physical, you know, how do we keep the remote people coming back to the office? But those are the important ways, and then collaborating like this becomes part of it, but not the whole story.
Thank you. I mean, there's some great wisdom here. I do have to pause to take some of the questions that we're getting from our audience. Thank you, Sandra. So I'll start with a question from Ibuka, and this is going to be to you, Kitaki. Ibuka says there are not enough, on the point of not enough success stories being shared. And I should say, by the way, this report that I read last night has some great, the IEC report has some great success stories. But, Ibuka asks, how can we keep sharing our country's success stories when it comes to this idea of global talent coming here, not experiencing maybe as much friction in finding a place here?
Manjula, one of the big things that I've also felt after being in Canada for 4 months is that we are very shy when it comes to talking about all the good things we're doing. I mean, living in America, I realized that marketing and, talking about what we're doing, when I mentioned that to my team, one of my directors said, well, we shouldn't be bragging. And I was like, well, it's not bragging, it's facts. And so everything from the university system to, the startup ecosystem, I mean, being at OCI, we're rebranded to OCI, but being in the startup ecosystem and seeing how much the government and all the organizations, a lot of them that are part of the IEC, are doing to support entrepreneurs and innovation, it's phenomenal. And I know Mars is doing a really good job, but we all need to do more of that. We need to show the world that we're not just here to, have immigrants have a great experience, but we're there to support them. There's excellent healthcare, which again, the US does not have, and just leverage all the things that make Canada so good. I think ramping up our marketing efforts is super important.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you on success stories. And I have another question here from Alex for anyone who wants to jump in on here. I think, John, perhaps I'll be putting this to you. He wonders, people may be choosing a place to live for a lifestyle, knowing that they can work remotely with organizations anywhere in the world. We know that's happening. My goodness, it's not even happening globally. We have people moving outside of big cities to do the same. What are the implications of the increasing possibility and acceptability of being able to live anywhere and work anywhere?
Well, I think the possibilities are exactly what you said. Talent can be recruited from anywhere in the world, and talent can, stay in place. And I know from my days as recruiting talent to University of British Columbia that spousal hiring was always an issue. Finding high quality jobs for two highly talented people in the same location was an issue. It's a less of an issue now, although I do want to emphasize what Sandra said, that working remotely has its advantages. It also has its disadvantages. There's a disconnect. There's a social disconnect from, I'm used to seeing people now on little tiny screens on my computer, and it's nice to be able to get together in person. So it's a mixed bag. But I think the opportunity to bring people in from around the world on a temporary or permanent basis does have an advantage. It also means that it's easier to poach talent because people can stay and continue living in lovely Vancouver where I am, and work in nasty Pittsburgh or wherever they're going to work.
That's
Manjula, can I add to that?
Yes, of course. I was actually going to come to you, Michael. Next, go on.
Yeah, I was just as opposed to kind of where people are, I think we're a company creator, and we think it's a great success when the people that we are training at the kind of intersection between business and science, go to our spinoffs and become the champions and leaders of those spinoffs. But those employees that do that, the star employees, are those that embrace kind of hybrid skill development. So these are STEM graduates, scientists that learn about the regulatory process, or patent law, or they want to be entrepreneurs, or into kind of manufacturing operations. I think that we need to celebrate the stories of people who take on those hybrid skill development. Those are the ones that are, I think, those are the jobs of the future. It's not just your kind of basic. I think it addresses your early question about aspiring STEM graduates and more to take on science as a basic foundational education.
Interesting. Michael, I'm going to get you to say the last word on this as well, and very quickly. What advice can you offer to talent in terms of competing as tech sector employees?
Did you lose me?
Yes. I saw this question come up and I thought you'd be the perfect person to answer it. And I think we have a few minutes left. So what advice can you offer to talent in terms of competing as tech sector employees, given that we are seeing fewer job postings due to COVID? And then Sandra, I'd love to hear your voice on that too, after Michael has had some say.
In terms of well, it kind of goes to my previous answer. I think the star employees, the high trajectory employees, are those that are developing hybrid skills. And it goes back to the science-based foundations, the STEM graduates. Those graduates that can understand entrepreneurship or develop skills on the regulatory side or around IP development. Those are the leaders of the future, certainly in biotech, and I think in high tech in general. So people looking for jobs need to differentiate themselves in a competitive environment. But there's lots of jobs out there, at least in our sector. But I think that those hybrid skills are important.
Sandra?
It's exactly the same. I think your career is a Venn diagram, and you just follow that overlap. And what's that adjacent skill? And you know more than you think you do, and your experiences are transferable. And I do think there's also there's a certain mercenary person, mindset of just chasing the biggest contract or the next biggest contract, and that may be okay, but following your Venn diagram keeps you more marketable in the long run. And I think that's I think it's about what will keep us marketable in the long run is a better career choice than always the next biggest thing that is short term.
And you know what, intuitively, that makes so much sense to me. When you have an ecosystem that is scaling, those are exactly the skills that companies need. They really need those sort of hybrid personalities that Michael, both you and Sandra have mentioned. I just want to say thank you. Such a pleasure. I wish we had another 30 minutes for this chat. There's obviously a lot of wisdom here. I'll just mention who our fabulous panelists are again. John Hepburn, the CEO and Scientific Director of Mitacs; Kitaki Desai, the Vice President of Business Development at the Ontario Centres of Excellence; Sandra McClellan, the Vice President of Organizational Effectiveness and Rewards at OpenText; and Michael May, the President and CEO of the Center of Commercialization of Regenerative Medicine. Thank you. You can find this, as I said, must-read report on the IEC website. Thank you, and stay tuned for more of Impact Week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.